No, I'm not going to sing to open this one. I watched In the Heights, actually earlier today with my partner Liz. Um, and obviously, I've seen Hamilton before. We both have. We did a joint review. Go ahead, check that out. Um, I can tell you right now, she liked In the Heights a little bit better. She did not feel the need to ruin it with feminism the way she felt compelled to with Hamilton. So that's sort of the general opinion that she has for those who might have been interested. I do hope to get her on the channel again at some point, but it's just like logistics are a pain. Anyways, I suppose I'll mostly be talking about my thoughts on this, and I'll actually be kind of surprised if I get a full 10-minute review out of this because I don't have anything that deep to say. I should first say that In the Heights is a show that I know of and was familiar with in the broad strokes. I knew it was Lin-Manuel Miranda. I knew it was what he did before Hamilton. I knew it was relatively popular, but I'd never heard the soundtrack. I'd never seen it on stage. So I was coming into this fairly cold. And it's pretty good. I didn't connect with it exceptionally well, but none of that is because of faults with the film. So it's kind of fitting, actually, that this was directed by John Chu, who also directed Crazy Rich Asians, because my overall feeling on it is quite similar, which is that, like that film, which in that case it was a romantic comedy, basically, which is a genre I don't have a ton of interest in, and here within the Heights, it is a sort of neighborhood-focused drama, for the most part, dealing with people's concerns as they're getting older. What are they going to do with their lives? And that kind of angst and uncertainty is also a general genre I don't have a ton of interest in. So my overall feeling basically comes down to I don't heavily connect with this, but I appreciate that it exists because it is representing groups of people who don't normally get to have these kinds of stories told about them, especially not in anything intended for mainstream consumption or in anything containing a significant budget. So, I'm happy it exists. The people portrayed in Crazy Rich Asians and in this, they have every right to these types of films as anybody else, but I don't connect to these types of stories all that closely, and I wouldn't have connected any more than I did if they'd been white people and In the Heights was set in suburbia. I don't think I would connect with it any more than I connected with this. Now, that's not to say it left me completely cold. It didn't. The music was certainly a lot of fun. It was well filmed for the most part. I I have had a tendency to rail against the idea of adapting stage to screen. I do appreciate that in a lot of cases it's the only way some people are ever going to get to see these stories at all, because Broadway, as much as I love it, is not the most accessible freaking thing in the world. But from an artistic standpoint, I tend to feel like it's usually diminishing, or at the very best a wash. What I will say about this is that for the most part, they took very good advantage of being able to film on location in New York and really give you a feel for the neighborhood that this is all set in. I think probably a bit more than I would expect they would have been able to do on stage. Again, having not seen it, I can't say that definitively, but that's my suspicion. There were, however, a couple of segments in it where it did feel very stagey, and I really felt like I'm watching something that's basically how they would have done it on stage, and it kind of took me out of it a bit, if I'm honest. The main example of that, if you've seen it, is with Abuela's song, which is a gorgeous song, and she sings it really well, but the way it's presented is very stagey, with her kind of walking through this memory dream thing of her own past, but the way it's presented, I'm like, I feel like I'm watching a film stage show. And it took me out of it because most of the rest of the film doesn't feel like that and isn't presented in that way. But that moment really kind of did take me out of what most of the rest of the film had been able to build. Choreography, as the songs are good, the choreography is phenomenal. Like the dancing is really really good, and it's not easy to sell dance in film, because a big part of really what makes dance amazing, if you see live dance performances, is just watching what the human body does live and in film, especially because since we're well past the old glory days of musical with these long unbroken takes, these dances get cut up, and so you don't have the sort of awe of just watching a long unbroken string of really impressive dance moves. That almost never happens anymore. But even despite that, the choreography was very good. The choreography felt like it was well fit to film. So it wasn't trying to be impressive in the same way that stage choreography is, which is another way in which this did well with presenting this on film versus stage, even though it had other moments like the one I cited where they kind of backpedaled on their ability to do that well. Performances are all good. I will say also that the music feels a bit more appropriate here than in Hamilton. Now, that's not the criticism to Hamilton that it sounds like, but what I mean is the musical stylings that were brought to Hamilton were very intentionally and deliberately anachronistic. And they're not what you would ever normally associate with that time and place. Now, that was done to effect and to sort of give a different perspective on that point in history than you normally get with any kind of presentation of it. So I get it, but here it feels much more like the music is being used as one more way to represent this neighborhood, to represent the people who live here, and to use the music to give you more of a sense of who they are and what they're about as a people. Even beyond whatever they're saying in the lyrics, that just the feel of the music is indicative of a culture, and which is something that's not at play in Hamilton. Again, one's not better than the other. I just did find it interesting that here it felt like this is the kind of music being done because organically this is music that makes sense if you're going to tell a story about this neighborhood and these people musically. Whereas Hamilton, the music is the way it is because that's what Lin-Manuel Miranda writes. And again, it works, but it's just sort of interesting to compare and contrast in that way. I did say the performances are good, and they are. I do feel like the background and the side characters drew my attention a lot more than the main ones. That's, again, not actually the criticism that it sounds like, because the main characters are kind of typical and slightly bland to this kind of story. You have the guy turning 30 who's like, I want to, move on and do something else with my life. You have this young girl who just has a lot of familial pressure put on her and sort of a life laid out that she is supposed to follow. And they're valid stories, but I see them a lot. And so I'm just kind of like, eh. But the side characters and the background characters, they drew my attention really well. People like Petey and Sunny and all the ladies from the salon. A lot of fun to be had there. Now, you can either take that as a criticism, in the sense of the leads are less interesting than the side characters. I actually consider it kind of a positive because it's a bit more like the neighborhood and the world feels fleshed out because these side and background characters are so captivating. This is going to sound weird, but it's good world building. And the reason that sounds weird is you don't normally hear that said about anything that is meant to represent a real place. You don't think about world building something that actually exists in the world. What are you talking about? Well, even if it is a place that really exists, you still have to build that world and sell it to your audience who may never have been to the actual place. So that's what I mean when I said it's good world building. It does a good job of really enveloping you in this neighborhood and the people who live there. So my overall feelings on it are, it's good. It's possibly even great. It's just not the kind of story or the kinds of lead characters that I connect with, at no fault to the actors, the writers, the music, or the director. It's just something that I can look at and go, that was good. But it's just not the kind of story and characters that I tend to gravitate towards or that usually appeals to me. And given that, the fact that I still say it's good should actually probably be taken as fairly high praise, because this kind of story I'd be more inclined to go, oh God, I'm bored. And I didn't. It's maybe a little long. It's almost 2.5 hours. Again, kind of a holdover from the fact that it was originally a stage play, which would have had an intermission and can get away with it a bit more. Probably could have used a little trimming, if I'm being completely honest. Not that any part like, oh, get rid of this, but like 2 hours 20 minutes. I would have condensed slightly, but again, that's me. In the Heights was good. I had a decent enough time watching it, and as someone who does not normally gravitate to these kinds of stories, these sorts of neighborhood slice of life stories about people, trying to figure out their lives, and like it's just, this sort of growing up familial neighborhood community tension drama, a little bit of romance thing. It's just not my bag. But I still liked it decently enough. So if this is your bag, I would expect you'd probably like it quite a bit. So take that as you will. In the Heights, did you see it? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. You'll also find a link to my Patreon down there. There's rewards at every tier of support, but don't sweat it. The other stuff, the likes, the shares, subscribes, they all help me out. So you can do all of that and give me a little boost, but no pressure. Take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break.